So for those of us who do not know who are you and what do you do?
Um, I am a semi-retired professional musician. Um, was pro for about 30 years, and I have a background in art and graphic design and electromechanical. So I was a gearhead. I loved to build hot rods and engines. And still had spinal injury and, picking up a cylinder head and a little bit much. So I went to more art music. And I had a spinal injury, which rendered me unemployable. So I had to monetize my hobbies, which are art and music. And my first break was getting hired at a music school. Now, this music school had 34 teachers on 3 different campuses. It was big. And the owners were music professors at the University of Florida. Well, I got a call one night. I was driving back from a gig I think I might have been in Atlanta, going back to Gainesville, Florida, and my drummer friend called me. He says, Robert, I got a recital, but the boys can't play the parts. Can you learn these songs for the recital tomorrow? I said, how many you got? He said, there's 40. And I said, okay, give me the cassettes, put them in a bag, and hang them on my door. I'll get home, I'll make a pot of coffee and pull an all-nighter, and I'll see you in the morning. So I get there the next morning, and everybody has a master's degree. It was a requirement at the school. And the boys, the 2 guitar players, their complaint was they couldn't find the sheet music, because they're classically trained. And they wanted to sight read their parts. But sheet music is kind of hard to come by for some different genres. But anyway, I learned the songs, and I got there, and the singer said, who the hell is this guy? And I introduced myself. She says, do you have a master's degree? I said, no. So she took her lead sheets and threw them up in the air and walked out. So now I had to cover for 2 guitar players, and I had to sing it too. And so I did, and I pulled it off. Because the way my ear works, if I'm listening for guitar parts, I'm hearing all the parts. So I'm learning the bass, the drums, keys. I'm learning everything while I'm listening to the guitar part. So I had her lead sheets. So I had the lyrics there, and I had written my number charts. And so after I pulled it off, the owner come up and says, man, did you really just learn these songs last night? I said, I charted them last night, yes. And then I spent time memorizing the signatures. He said, man, we don't have anybody here who can do that. He says, would you like to teach? And I said, yeah. He says, well, your first 2 students are going to be those knuckleheads that couldn't pull this off. So here I am teaching degreed musicians how to rock, And I really started getting into it, but I was frustrated with writing charts all day. It's like, listen, man, I need to automate this. So I got a graphic design degree, and I would create a book for each student, and so that led to connections because these guys that were teachers, they were working musicians, and they said, man, you can play it. You want to go do a gig? I said, sure. And that wound up with me starting a jam session. And the key to having a successful jam is never outplaying your guests, because they're usually, they want to get out there and be musicians, but family and business, they just can't do it. So when they have the chance to go to a jam session, they bring their family and friends, and they want to be a star. Let them. Don't get up there and humiliate them.
Where are you from?
I was born in Oklahoma, and then in the early 60s, my dad took over a startup refinery in Brooker, Florida. And so from there until I graduated high school, I lived in Lake Butler, Florida. It's a little town in North Florida, near Gainesville, like a bedroom community for Gainesville. And we called it LB Dodge, as in get the hell out of. Lake Butler Dodge. So that was I didn't even bother to go to the graduation ceremony. I graduated with honors, but while everybody else was graduating, I was driving a truck.
Tell us about your childhood growing up.
Well, that was kind of rough. I had no support for my artistic endeavors. I mean, my mom supported it, and she told me that if I got a piano, she'd make sure I got piano lessons. So that's what I did with the money from working in the fields, and got a piano. And then my mom died, and my dad says, "Son, raising kids is women's work. Your mom's dead. Tough break. You're on your own." He said, "You got a sharp mind and a strong back." And he says, "I'm not going to worry about you. You're on your own." And that's the way it was until I was 14 when that happened. And then I got word. I stopped going home because it was not a very pleasant environment. Doing the couch circuit, and then my dad had taken my guitar away from me because he didn't want that. He hated the fact that I wanted to be a musician. And it took me, well, it wasn't until decades later when he was on his deathbed that I found out why. It was a PTSD trigger for him because his dad was a music teacher. And he died in his arms when my dad was 12. So anyway, there was this hippie commune not far, 18 miles away. And so they had guitars over there, so I started walking over there. It was 18 miles each way. I'd just spend the night, and then they had, play guitars. I'd do chores, and get something to eat. They'd give me a place to crash. And, I could catch a school bus. So I started doing that. And turned out that one of the guitar players there got picked up by Wet Willie. And he went on to be Cyndi Lauper's guitar player. Patrick Buchanan's his name. His dad was a popular jazz musician, so he grew up with it. And just learning from him got me ready to play, and get out there and stretch out a little bit. And then I joined the Air Force because I really wanted to see the world, and I wanted the medical benefits in the college, everything they had to offer. And, well, you know the drill, being an Air Force vet. But I got stationed in Albuquerque when I met Tim Pierce. Actually, he heard me playing something, and he come over and said, "Hey, man, show me that lick. What was that?" And he was asking me questions. I said, "Look, I'm self-taught. I don't know anything about theory." He said, "Man, we got to change that." So I got mentored by Tim Pierce, who was Rick Springfield's guitar player. So by the time I'd gotten my chops together, I got shipped to Germany, which I joined the Air Force to get to Germany because I had two brothers there in the Army, and they were saying, "Man, this music scene is smoking. You need to get over here." So anyway, I did, and started trying to get a band together. And this is when I realized, my friends, I didn't speak the language yet and didn't have a driver's license, but I noticed that they had, roundabouts, traffic circles. And I started seeing, well, everything, there has to be a hub to everything, and then the way this works. So I applied that to my dilemma of not speaking the language and getting in a band. So I rented a castle and threw a big costume ball, Frankenstein's castle in Eberstadt. And Morale, Welfare, and Recreation gave me 3 buses. They said, for every 50 people you get signed up for this concert, we'll give you a bus and a driver. So they gave us 3 of those big blue buses the Air Force has. And we threw this concert, and I got picked up because I created the hub, but I got picked up by the top-rated band in the Blue Book, which was the commercial entertainment circuit. And the way that worked is every 3 months they would have a get-together where all the bands were rated, and they bid on them. So we got rated at 750 when the average was 250. And the reason we did is because we had lock-in rehearsals. We had to do 40 hours a week in rehearsal. And if you made a mistake, you paid a fine. And the fine was straight to the beer fund. So, after a few hours in the studio, we'd make a few mistakes intentionally so he'd go down to the pub. The guest house, same thing. But that turned out to be, I would say, the best band I ever played in, simply because the discipline of the band. You had to know your shit. We had a couple guys came through, in that environment, military environment, you have a lot of turnover. It's a transient environment. So we have a couple guys come in and want to be in the band, but this one guy, he was very talented, but he spent about 30 minutes. I was a hard ass. And somebody coming on audition, I would say, entertain me. He said, what? I thought I was going to play with a band. I said, you got to get past me. I said, entertain me. And if they could entertain me, they could meet the band, That's the way that worked. But this one guy, he had this Ibanez guitar and this Sun amplifier, and he spent all this time trying to get his tone. I said, dude, there's a Les Paul and a Plexi right there. He says, I don't want to play stuff just because of the name. I said, names are earned, okay? This is the rock and roll standard right here. A Gibson and a Marshall, come on. So he plugged into that, said, holy shit, man. I said, well, he played, and then he had some really good licks, but I said, you're not ready for this, we're playing some pretty big shows here. It's just, you gotta, and once you get the spot, you gotta be able to hold it, That's one of the things that on the Texas circuit, UT is putting out they got a guitar program that put out some killer guitar players. And they're better educated, younger and better looking than me. And they'd always come for my gig, And I'd let them, because I knew one thing that they didn't. And they'd get up there and they'd show me what they can do. And what they could do was play really fast. No sense of dynamics, smothering everybody, stomping on everybody, because, they wanted to show us what they could do. They showed us what they couldn't do. And I said, there's a reason this old man has this gig and you don't. He said, well, what is that, man? I said, I know how to play songs. I'm up here playing songs. You're up here playing guitar. There's a difference, And so one of the things I think is really important for you you got to get in the hub. And one of the most valuable assets that the community has is jam sessions. Because there's so many bands that spin off from those. People meet each other and say, hey, man, I like the way you play. Would you like to come over? So if you're new in town, the first thing you got to do is get in a jam host band or start a jam, because you don't have to go audition. All the best players in your market parade right in front of you, They hear you, you hear them, and if there's potential, it's not that hard to get something going.
Did you see yourself becoming a famous act?
No. Now, my childhood it was an ego crusher. I had no support. So I'm supporting myself is not as easy as for some, because I have complex PTSD, childhood trauma. But I'm real good at getting other people. I've always been a catalyst, supporting other people. That's why I opened a music school, I wanted to have a lot of experience, and I wanted to share it. And the best way to learn is to teach, because the questions that the students, or the challenges they present, they want to learn something. They want to learn something way beyond their capability. So you try to teach them the basics. I said, instead of me teaching you, your 10 favorite songs. I said, I can teach you the basics so you can play any song, you know. I had a program 6 months long, and I guaranteed you could play by ear. So it was ear training and theory. But, you give me 6 months, and I had one kid in 3 months. He was opening for national acts. He was 14 years old, and he didn't even know how to hold a guitar. So I just taught him. He come down to my jam one time, and one of the guys was heckling me. That kid's better than you. I said, well, good for him. But then one of my regulars says, that's his student. I got, like, I've never outplay my guests. So they thought I could only play 3-chord blues songs. And, I grew up, in Southern rock. So that was my kind of my wheelhouse. And I switched to, started playing pedal steel when I had the spinal injury. I was 34 years old and had been playing music, since I started when I was 10 years old. And that was at that point where I had to monetize my hobbies. And I said, well, if I can't work at 34, what in the hell am I going to do when I'm 60? I said, well, who's working at 60? And I said, black bluesmen and country steel guitarists. Well, I'm not black, though I can play some blues. I was raised on it, but so I got a steel guitar. And in those 7 years that I was in a wheelchair, I learned to play the keyboards and the pedal steel. And so when I realized that the country players were making the money, I decided, I think that suits me. I'm a rocker, man. I mean, if you were to see my guitars, you would, I've got some shredders. I'm not the telly guy. I've got a nice telly, but I mean, I can do the Brett Mason stuff, and you have to. But for the neophytes out there, man, the more instruments you learn, the more styles you learn, the more opportunities you have. I mean, that steel guitar has saved my life a couple of times. And as far as people say you can't make a living playing music. Well, if you're waiting on Friday and Saturday night, then yeah, you're right. Speaking of right and wrong, if you say you can't do it, you can't. Because you've built that mental block. If you say you can, you can. You just flow right over it. Like when the Hopi elders say, see the world from the eye of the eagle. Just look down on it, and see what's going on down there. Because if you're in the midst of the fray, with all the dust flying everywhere, you're not going to see what's really happening. So you have to be cocksure about what you're doing, and you got to get out there. You got to be seen. All the opportunities I've had was just getting picked up in a dive. I went to this one show. There's a guy, he was a booking agent, and he would just call people off the call list. Hey, got a gig over, you want to go? I said, sure. So I was at this, and a guy got up there named Jerry Oddly and says, man, can you do any chicken picking? I said, sure. So he got up there and sang a song, and he liked the way I played, and he says, man, I got a gig for you. Well, come to turn out, he had 6 #1 hits on the Texas market. He was known as the Texas Hitman. And so I worked with him for a couple years. He's on Spotify if anybody is curious about him. But it's kind of a cross between Merle Haggard and Sleep at the Wheel. A lot of honky tonk. I did the honky tonk A circuit for 2 years, and then I moved up here. I moved up here 8 years ago, and moved up here to start an organic farm. But I kept having health issues. Went to the VA, and they said, man, the first person for 40 years, they didn't look at this. I mean, I've been homeless 3 times because of my health issues. So finally, after 40 years, they looked at at I got an appointment with a neurologist, and she said, I can tell by the way you're walking in here, you're a malingerer, because you don't have the issues you claim to, otherwise you wouldn't be able to walk like that. And I said, listen, it's taken me 40 years to get this appointment. Can you just humor me? Let's go through the process. She says, okay. We're 10 minutes into it where they do the muscle testing. And she says, hang on, the machine isn't working right. So she calls a tech up there. About 30 minutes later, he says, there's nothing wrong with this machine. And there was tears in her eyes. She says, I'm so sorry that you've had to live like this. She realized that, the severity of my neurological condition. And she said, I can't compensate you for the past, but she says, I can make sure that your future is brighter. So she got me a pension, which, I've got 4 kids. So I couldn't support a family with music in this environment. It's just not vibrant enough. I know people who do, and you really have to hustle. In order for me to be able to go on the road, I had to have my music school, and I had a studio. So I play 13 instruments, so I can make you a demo. Give me a theme, and I'll give you a song. And I had a guitar repair shop. So that's just to be able to take off on the weekends, because you gotta pay some bills. And in that environment, it wasn't hard to reach the per capita income. So if you're not making your per capita income with your instrument, then you need to supplement, You need to have skills, and the better thing is to have skills within the industry, I'm in the application process right now for Full Sail, because my next move, I want to be an audio engineer and just be have my own center of the hub, produce songs, write songs. I've won several state contests with my songwriting. Top 10 political songwriters in top Florida. And I won my ex-wife, she was never very supportive of my music, which was funny because we jammed a lot. She's a great musician. That's what brought us together. I sold her a Les Paul. That's where we met. And a few years later, we were together and we got married. And our first child came along, and we named him Gibson after the way we met. And then 8 years later, he had a little brother born on his birthday. So I had to name him Marshall. Have a match set, And it's funny, the boys, if you separate, their age, say if you go back to the oldest one's 2-year-old picture, when the youngest one was 2, they look like twins. I'm not telling my youngest one, he's about to turn 9. I said, if you want to know what you're going to look like when you get older, just look at your brother.
You mentioned a few moments in your life where it sounds like you was at some of the lowest points in your life, with your spinal injury and being homeless, and you mentioned something about your childhood as well.
Yeah.
For people who may be going through these same circumstances, what advice do you have for these people? Like, what did you learn from being at your lowest point and getting out of it and now being where you are today?
We're all imbued with gifts. I study, how do I word this without people freaking out? Spiritual philosophy. I'm a 9th degree Adeptus Exemptus major. So understanding how the universe works, understanding universal law, you have to, everything works on the law of mentalism. Nothing exists that didn't begin with a thought. And so we control our own existence. Our own environment. I'll give you a classic example of the law of mentalism in practice. People say that, for instance, The Simpsons predict the future. If you put an image in front of millions of people, it will manifest. you know. So they're not predicting the future, they're suggesting it. And the mentalism of the people who see it create it. As one thinks, so does he become. You know. The order I belong to is a repository for the Essene teachings. And the Essenes go way back. They formed at the Library of Alexandria. And so we have the greatest minds, and basically the repository of human history. And so it's like having a library card to the Library of Alexandria. The resources are vast. But basically, there's a law of assumption. And colloquially, people say fake it till you make it. It's more like you have to see yourself in that driver's seat. And then anything that's not a part of it has to go. So I'm the only me I got, so I got to, take care of me. And now I have kids, so, any situation has a duality, the potential of duality, the law of duality. So, like, if somebody is broke, money doesn't disappear, it changes hands. Okay? So when you have no money, you have to figure out how to reverse the flow. And you have to use all of your natural gifts. I mean, nobody is born playing like Steve Vai. That's a lot of hard work, You have to be able to isolate yourself from all these distractions and focus on what this next step is. And then you have to exploit that step to its maximum so you can use it for the next step. So it's like when I was disabled and I was written up as unemployable by 3 different agencies because I never know when I'm going to collapse. I never know when I'm going to fall down. This is one of the reasons that I like playing the pedal steel guitar. At home, I mostly play rock guitar. And I write a lot of songs. I wrote about 30 songs the first year of COVID. I just really enjoyed the process.
What has been your biggest accomplishment in life?
Mastering the art of recovery, I guess. Because I've had 4 international moves, and people pick over your stuff in transit. Not every time, not everything I had was delivered. And the one thing that disappeared all 4 times was my art portfolio. Apparently they like my artwork. One of my pieces was used in the Ohio School of Art as an example of an untaught style, which was interesting because when I lived in Germany, I had a friend named Walter Pöbel, who was one of the top 10 airbrush artists in the world. He was doing like Porsche and Varta batteries for Einbank. And he saw my artwork and he liked it. And so he got me into this prestigious art contest. And I was disqualified because it's not a taught style, which is like, okay, it is now. But, So I've been published as an artist and as a musician. So when I was in the Air Force, after I got injured, and this was from the vaccinations, but I was on the flight line, and they have this barrier where in case a plane is overshooting the runway, it can't stop. They have this barrier that will pop up, and it's run on air compressor. So I was down there to replace the motor for the compressor. And I reached up like this, I handed it, and it just went down like this. I don't have any strength. I have a wing scapula, and that's from the infection. It was an immediate side effect of the vaccination. So that's where we discovered that I had a real problem. And so they changed my AFSC. And I was on a secret weapons development base. And so They taught us psionics, art of mental warfare. So I recognize patterns, especially when I was in Germany. I was, because of that background, about mental warfare, I was real curious as to how some scrawny little junior enlisted guy could, come out and try to take over the world, the whole Holocaust thing. So I interviewed when I was in my 20s, and the Bundeswehr, the Wehrmacht soldiers, were in their mid to late 60s. So I said, I'm in Germany, I speak German, I'll never have another opportunity to try to figure this out. So I interviewed a whole lot of Germans, a lot of Nazis. So what's going on today makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, because there are energies unseen. I mean, we see 0.005% of the light spectrum. We can have all kinds of different spiritual entities around us, and we'll never see them. We'll never be aware of them unless you're taught. And so I see the world from a strata of frequencies, and that's how I survived. I was diagnosed in 2012 with multiple myeloma, bone cancer, and they said, you got 3 years or less to live. And so I wanted to see how the Essenes, how Christ healed. And so I studied that. And I don't have cancer. I don't have a trace of cancer anymore. And the bottom line is that low frequency distortions can't manifest in a high frequency environment. So you have to keep it up in there. And I had to teach myself. I had monkey mind, all kind of thoughts coming in, and I had to teach myself how to be disciplined. That's not my thought. You don't belong here. Get out of here. And I wound up for a couple of years with this mantra, peace, love, harmony. I would say that. I get in my car and sit there for 5 minutes just saying that before I went out into the world. So that whenever you go out in public, if you have that peace, love, and harmony vibe, and you're not going to have any issues. So when I was on the Texas honky-tonk circuit, my nickname was the Preacher, and that's because of an incident. I walked in, and at the time, my hair was down about my waist, and I walked by this guy, and somebody grabbed me from behind, grabbed my hair, and said all kind of hateful stuff. And I turned around, and I'm looking at his chin. Now, I'm not a small man. I'm 6'4" and 260 pounds. And I have this approach. I call it option 3. It's because we're programmed for a binary world. We're either this or that. And nobody says, there's no rule that says you have to play that game. And so I knew that because of his size, he had the intimidation factor. So he would always play the fight or flight game. And so I said, man, this guy needs to hear a little option 3. So I looked him straight in the eyes. I said, you going to stand there and let the devil do your talking? And, calling his demons out. And he took 2 steps back and said, oh, man, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And then the guys saw this, and we go out in the parking lot. And he's crying on his phone to his mom. He said, Mom, I'm being such an asshole. I'm so sorry. It's like, dude, So energy, it's a transmutation of energy. It is how I survived. Because I've lost everything on several occasions. I had, when Katrina came through with her 2 sisters, that decimated me. I lost my job and my home over that deal. And then I moved to Texas, and before Katrina, some crackheads broke into my house and took everything, all my music stuff. I cleaned out my studio. I was insured, so I was able to replace most of it, and then went back to writing songs and teaching. And I would create content for my students, and so I got all the recording equipment and everything back together. And then when I moved to Texas, it happened again. I had a music school in a commercial building, and then I moved to. Every time I get everything all replaced, I like to have one of each of everything. Well, by that I mean I got a keyboard rig, drum set, bass rig, guitar rig, steel guitar rig. So if anybody comes over to play, they don't have to bring anything. Because one of the things that I had to do because of my health issues is I had to be the MVP. And by being the MVP, I mean I had to have the van, had to have the trailer, all the equipment, and studio and recording gear, and I had songs on the radio. So who and I sing. So who's going to get the gig? The guy you got to go pick up, or the guy that picks you up? With all the gear. So if it comes down to it, two guys, if you're gonna go with the guy that offers more value. So it's very important to have the value. One of the things I wanted to make sure that I mentioned was the importance of having a medium of communication. Music is a language. And when I moved to Germany, it was that language that got me incorporated in the community, in the economy at large in Germany. But the best thing you could do for yourself, for a young musician, is learn the Nashville number system. And I was explaining that to one of my students because she says, man, I caught your show at Billy Bob's. She says, I didn't know you played steel guitar. And I said, well, I didn't know their songs. She said, well, how can you play for 2.5 hours with songs you never knew? I said, well, the first thing they did when they called me up was, do you know the Nashville number system? And I said, yeah. And he asked me a chord progression. I said, I don't care where you start. The number system is the same. The only thing you need to know is where it's one. And so when I got there, the bass player says, do you play bass? I said, yeah, I can play bass. He says, okay, you know what key we're in then. If I put my finger here, I'm going to put my finger on the key we're in, and with this hand, I'm going to give you the numbers. So the drummer would wait 4 seconds after each song before he started kicking in the new one. So I had about 3 or 4 seconds before he kicked in to learn the progression. So by the time the drummer had done counting in, I knew the chord progression. I knew the key, the chord progression, and the timing. And the very first song I had to start, I'd never heard it before. And these people trusted me, and they had to. But, that's why I was on a call list. I didn't even know I was on a call list at Billy Bob's. When I got to Texas, I got my first gig. It took me 20 minutes to get my first gig. And I just ran an ad on Craigslist, said, new steel player in town. That was it. Texas has got some damn fine steel players, but they don't have enough. So I was in the intermediate stage at that point. I'll tell you what, 8 years on the honky-tonk circuit, you get your chops together, Because, well, half my gigs are on guitar, but I'm sitting there like 2 foot away from Hall of Fame steel guitar players. They don't know I play steel guitar, and I'm robbing them blind, I'm watching their feet, seeing what knee relievers they're using. I'm watching their positions, how they tune. I went through 26 different components on steel guitar before I arrived at the one I have. And it's a universal E13 tuning, but trial and error. And my standard was I had to be able to play all of the chords to Crazy, the Patsy Cline tune, without using the bar. So if you play an E, I don't need a bar. I can play all the chords. And if you could play that you can play any chord, Like a standard setup, 10 strings, 3 pedals, 4 knee levers. You got like 12 pulls. On mine, there's 34 pulls, 7 pedals, and 6 knee levers. So it's a machine, man. One kid asked me one time, because when I was teaching and hosting a jam and playing in a house band all at the same time, I probably had a guitar in my hands a minimum of 12 hours a day. And that was 6 days a week. 7 if I was lucky. you know. But and this kid come up and asked me, he says, man, I really love the way you play guitar. How do you know how to do that? I said, listen, you got to have your muscle memory and your theory. So get all that together, and then you surrender. He said, what do you mean? I said, this comes from the ether. It's already in existence. You just have to tune into it. He says, what do you mean? I said, I'm the lucky son of a bitch that gets to hold the guitar while this happens. That's what I mean. I said, you have to master your craft. And you have to be able to not only go in there playing what you know, you have to be able to play what you hear. I said, being a musician, your most valuable skill is to be the ability to listen. So I worked the call list. People, I'd go, my forte was walking in cold and playing all night. So that's a valuable skill. And so basically you have to create your own demand, show them what you got. Because every market has a hub, and the center of the hub is invitation only. You're just not going to walk up there and bang your way in. One of the biggest things that perturbed me is people who are thinking you can. We do all this work. We're playing a house gig at downtown Fort Worth. We're talking in stockyards. And on 3 different occasions, this guy comes in trying to bully his way in to get his daughter up on stage. I call it princess syndrome. And we tell him, say, listen, no, this is not how this works. This is the A circuit. You work your way up here. I said, listen, if she needs pointers or something, I have a music school. I'll sponsor her. We have classically trained vocalists. That's what she wants to do, then I'll help her. But we're not shutting down our show. People aren't here to see somebody they've never heard of. So we built this reputation, and we've got songs on the radio. This is a business. You don't just crash. You just can't just take the driver's seat. Sorry, that's not the way it works. But they think that they could just, show up and take over. No. You gotta shine. You got to be able to talk yourself into a situation, it sounds arrogant. I've had people tell me, I'd answer an ad and say, hey, man, we need a player. I said, give me a set list, and I'll show up and ready, loaded for bear. I've learned a set list on a freaking bus before, It's not rocket science. It's a language. And there's only 4 different types of chord progressions. You have your diatonic, scale, tone, degree, and your cycle, 4ths and 5ths, and you have your chromatic and element. If you want to put them all in a song, just listen to the Beatles. But it's pattern recognition. Listen for the pattern, because everybody's playing. It's one big song, really. To me, it's all just one big song, and I just listen for the patterns, and I listen to what the song wants. I don't just try to shred over it. I've gone through all my phases. Grew up on the Southern Rock. I learned that, and then I got mentored in my modes and theory by Tim Pierce, and so I played. I had to learn the Van Halen licks, and I had to learn them playing country. I had to learn all the Brent Mason, Brad Paisley, those licks. There's a lot of technique goes into that. You listen to Brad Paisley. If you don't play banjo, you're not going to get those rolls, and if you haven't done any shredding, you're not going to get those sweeps. It's like elements from every style going in there. And he's a master of them. So that'll keep you up at night, because in order to play these songs, you have to master the technique. And anytime I would hear somebody come along with a new sound, I would try to get my hands on at least 10 songs and memorize them. Because if you can crack the way they think, you can play like them. you know. And we're all working with the same basic tools, you know. I mean, this is as far as writing songs, I'm very modal. Um, and the Greek houses of order were named after emotions. So we have, well, your Ionian, that's your major. It's very la la la, you know, rainbows and flowers. And the Mixolydian is your rock and roll, and that is it works on the fight or flight part of the brain. So music is a language, and when I was trying to figure out how to communicate with music, if I heard anything, I would try to emulate if it had an impact on me. So I hear a baby crying, and I'm an empath. You know, I love babies, and so I would try to get that emotion out of my guitar and pass it on. And one day I realized just how much responsibility you have as a musician on stage, because you can get those people to do anything, and you can incite them, excite them, you know, incite them. I was playing at a little honky tonk in North Florida. We're playing this George Jones tearjerker. I'm on steel guitar, and I looked up and everybody's crying. And I looked down at my steel guitar and there's tears on my pad. I'm crying too, didn't even know it. And I said, man, I gotta lay off of that bar shimmer, because that'll reach right in and grab your soul, man. When my ex and I were dating, we were playing music and having a few beers, and I broke out the Jack Daniels. So we started drinking Jack Daniels. So she got up to go to the bathroom. And when she got up, I switched to steel guitar. I started playing the steel guitar. And about 20 minutes went by. She didn't come out of the bathroom. So I went and knocked on the door. She's not in there. So I looked out the front door, and down at the end of the street, leaning up against the wall, there she is. And I walked up, and she's just bawling her eyes out. I said, what's going on? She says, don't you ever get me drunk and play that goddamn steel guitar again. I said, what do you mean? She says, well, it's like, here's the bottle and there's the gun. It's the saddest shit I ever heard in my life. I wrote a song, of course, you know, give me a phrase, I'll give you a song. But I realized that's you have a great deal of responsibility, you know. Once you learn that art of manipulating, it's a transmutation of energy, you know. People want to be entertained. They work hard for their money, and they want to spend a little bit of it having a good time. You got to give it to them, you know. You got to give them their money's worth. But right now, I mean, I like all kinds of music. You know, I'm trying to work on my funk slap right now. I bought a little jazz bass, and I just wanted it. You know, I'd never had that urge before, but I started, you know, watched a few videos. So it's like fun. So, you know, I played jazz. I can read jazz charts. I'm not drawn to it. There's not enough raw, visceral emotion to it, you know. I mean, the jazz players will argue the point, but there's an old joke goes around. What's the difference between a rock guitar player and a jazz player? A rock guitar player plays 3 chords in front of 1,000 people. So, you know, I mean, I've gone to see my friends play jazz, and they're just staring at their music stands. So another thing I don't go for is, if you're going to be a solo act, don't put a barrier between you and your audience, you know?
What do you want your legacy to be? Like, where do you see yourself in the next 10, 15 years? What kind of legacy do you want to leave behind?
Well, I want to leave behind an honorable reputation, and I've really been a catalyst for others, working for others, putting things together that helping them soar. I got a guy I'm helping right now. He's a songwriter, and he struggles with his instrument. So I give him a guitar and try to get the gist of what he's trying to pull off, and then I'll play it for him. And I'll produce the whole thing, drums, bass, keyboards, guitar, depending on the style, what comes next, maybe pedal steel, maybe little keyboards. I'm not a, I have played rock keyboards, but I'm not a pianist by any stretch, but I can play keyboard pads. And thank goodness for MIDI maps, because if I make a mistake, I can go in there and clean it up, When I play the keyboard in real time and Logic Pro X, then I can go in there and clean it up. But, that's why keyboard players are hard to find. For one, they typically tend to be educated. So that's going to give them a low bullshit threshold, They're not going to want to teach you anything. I said, man, I'm going to come and play. And my favorite players that I've ever worked with were classically trained, but they play by ear. Just walk in cold and hear what's going on and contribute, Because it is a language, and you don't want to yell at each other, So, like guitarists, they think if they can hear another guitar player, they're not loud enough, They get into dynamics issues. That was a big problem that the guys down in Texas that kept trying to steal my job. It was a good job, but they kept trying to steal it, and I kept letting them because I knew that if they had that attitude, they weren't going to be able to take it. Because it's an attitude of service that gets you there, and you got to be able to get along with people. Nobody wants a 12-hour ride sitting next to a jackass. You have to be congenial, and you have to be professional. So you can make a living as a musician. And I've had people tell me that I couldn't as I was doing it, And the one that got me the most is this guy writing out a check at my studio telling me you can't make a living doing what you're doing. Well, I asked him how much he made. And I was making about 30 grand more than he was. I said, listen, I'm too busy to get a job. I said, why would I want to take a loss to do something that's going to cause me pain? Because I'm disabled, I can't. I get a job, I'll get fired, because of my physical limitations. But I can put together a show, and I can play my part, My favorite gig was as a floater. I had this one gig where the club owner asked me, she said, well, this band's contract is up. She says, will you stay and be my house musician? She says, I said, what do you mean? She says, well, you got your PA rocks. I love your PA. She says, I want you to leave your PA and I'll pay you for that. I'll give you $100 a night for your PA. I'll pay you $80 base rate and $20 per instrument above that. And so I said, man, that sounds like a really good gig, because they weren't paying much. They would pay like $300 for a band, because that's what the band would ask. They'll settle for it, But they just show up like a lot of three pieces are around here. And so they'd have the option of having whatever other instrument they wanted that I played, or, I'd just sit out and let them do their thing and just run sound. But I showed up with my pedal steel here. I had my keyboard here. I had to stand up and play my lap steel. I had a Fry's with that microphone. I call it Fry's with that, the headset microphone, because that's what they put them on and say, you want fries with that? So that's what I call it. Anyway, it's sick humor. But my microphone, steel, keyboards, lap steel, harmonicas on that top tier, and then I have my dobro, my banjo, and a 12-string tuned-in Vestipol. And, man, it was great. It was great. They paid me well. And I had that house gig until one of the bands wanted me to be their full-time guy. So I said, well, when we leave this venue, because you're not paying me as much as she is, I said, I'm not doing this for $50, And so the bass player showed up drunk repeatedly. And so I said, listen, I'm not coming down here for this, okay? You're too drunk to perform. You can't just walk on stage with a case of beer and a cooler and spend more time bent over getting beer than you do singing. I said, oh man, I'm just going through a thing. I'm going through a divorce. I need this. I said, listen, you need to handle your shit. It's what you need to do. I said, I'm going to handle mine. I said, I'm not going to be here Saturday. So then, well, the next weekend, I've already told them, say, guys, you pushed it too far. Okay, I'm not doing this amateur hour thing. And so I'm at a gas station. I've dressed up for the part, and I overhear this conversation. She said, the girl says, "Hell no, I'm not going to Three Corners. There's still a player left." Well, that wasn't me. I wasn't playing at Three Corners. So I said, "Excuse me, did I just hear you mention something about an opening for a steel guitar player?" I said, "Where is this Three Corners?" She says, "It's about 2 miles down this way." I said, "Okay." So I got there early. I went in there and set my steel guitar up. And the guy walked in and says, "You're awfully late getting your shit off my stage, aren't you, Bubba?" And I said, "No, man, I'm the first one here." He said, "Who the hell do you think you are?" I said, "I think I'm your new steel player. What do you think?" He says, "I'll tell you what, you get through the first set without embarrassing me and you got the job." So I got the job. And then he's the one that referred me for the music school. He wound up out in Texas. He wanted my curriculum that I had developed for teaching guitar. And so he hired me to move out to Texas. So I moved out to Texas on a salary. But, I needed about double what he was paying me. So first thing I did was found a jam session. And I walked in there and I said, "Guys, I'm going to be straight up. I'm here to crash this party." He says, "What do you mean?" I said, "I need to be in this jam band." And the guitar player said, "Thank God, man." I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "I'm driving all the way from Plano just to help my friends get this off the ground." This was after I played, so they knew that, I wasn't just talking shit. Because anybody can talk shit, man. You got to back that up, But that's your calling card, is your ability, There are bands around here that we have one guy is very prolific at booking gigs. He's done the circuit as a solo act, and so he wants to bring in a band. He just calls people. He goes see shows and sees people play and said, "Man, you want to be on my call list?" I'm building a call list now, because you have to have that. You have to have competent people that know how to walk in and play a song. Show up knowing their homework and just play songs. I am so fortunate to be able to play with the band I play with right now, the Gone Country Band, because every one of those guys is a master of his craft, and I look forward to rehearsal, because we just get to hang out with some brilliant musicians and have fun, My kids are into it. I have he's 12, but when he was 10, I did a show, probably the best paying show ever. And he asked me how much I made, and I told him. He says, "Holy shit, for one night?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "Man, I want to be just like you, Dad." So he's working on it. My 17-year-old, he's getting pretty good on guitar. I bought him keyboards, drums, a bass rig, guitar rigs, everything. So they're set. They're not going to have to do what I did. They're going to have support. So they want to come in and work on the piano. I'll get up and let them have the studio. I'll find something else to do. But I spend my days in the studio. And I want to work on the other side of it. I want to master the other side of it. Because I just record old school. I just go for a killer tone and then just try to get a good blend, I don't use a lot of outboard gear or plugins. I've had engineers compliment me on my recordings. I won a songwriting contest, and I went in and I played a demo. And he says, "Robert, I didn't know you had that kind of recording equipment." I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "Those drums are killer." He says, "There's no way that's a drum machine." I said, "That's 23 hours of programming a drum machine to get that sound." Because you can't have every single hit sound exactly the same. It's got. My first instrument was drums, but I switched to guitar when I was 14 for my main instruments because nobody picks up a 14-year-old kid with a drum set on the side of the road. I had to hitchhike to practice because I lived out of town. I lived on an oil refinery, and nobody wanted to come to the oil refinery because it smelled like an oil refinery. People would say, "What the hell is that smell?" I said, "That's the smell of money. It stinks, you know." But
If people want to get in contact with you, how would they?
I say my phone number here on. All right, 479-316-9881, and I go by Bobby Lovelle, BOBBYLOVELLE, and I have a few videos out there, Bobby Lovelle and Friends, and I have a SoundCloud, Bobby Lovelle. Might be Bobby Lovelle and Friends. But I got that name, Bobby Lovelle, at a Little Red's Longhorn in Stockyards. I was playing guitar, and this lady, I'm assuming she was Cajun, because she sounded like my ex-brother-in-law's family in New Orleans, Nolans, I should say it. But she come up, she said, "Honey, what's your name?" I said, "My name's Robert." She said, "Bobby." "What's your last name?" I said, "Lovelace." She said, "Bobby Lovelle." And boys were on stage, and they saw that, and they started calling me Bobby Lovelle. I said, "My name is Robert Lovelace, and you go into a redneck bar and people half drunk, they're going to tease you about Linda. So I can go in there's Bobby Lovelle. It's got a nice ring to it, easy to remember, and nobody bothers me about Linda, I mean, wasn't even her name. She just stole our name. Anyway, so that's how I got that nickname. My nickname before that was Spatch. Spatch Jones is what they called me in Florida because I was always, after every show, I'd say, "Come on, guys, I'm coming back to my house, and I'll make you breakfast." So I had a spare bedroom, a travel trailer, and 2 tents. So you guys are not going to drive down these roads. I mean, the gig was like just down the road, short distance. I said, "You guys been drinking? Let's go. I'm going to give you a breakfast and a bed. So you'll be alive tomorrow for our next project." But this lady came home with the bass player, and she says, "Why you got that spatch?" She was drunk. She couldn't say spatula. "Why you got that spatch, that spatch in your hand?" And so that's how they got Spatch Jones. Basically, when we went on the road, I was basically took a chuck wagon. I took all the essentials, and I just cooked for everybody. It's a lot cheaper. I mean, the thing I always did was just shine, and people will say, "Hey man, you sound good on that." I've had people ask me to sing for their band. I sing on all my demos. And I tell them no. And they say, "Why?" Because I said, my voice isn't giving anybody chill bumps. That's fine. I said, I want to get chill bumps when I hear somebody sing. Because the human voice is the most sensual instrument on the planet. Because if it comes to the heart, man, it'll bring tears to your eyes. And I can't do that. And so I don't want to. I don't want, he's an average singer, It's like, I'll sing on my demos, and then we'll find a better singer, I see it as a weakness, as my weakness, at not being a strong vocalist. Now, I'm a better backup vocalist than I am a primary, because I have a high range. And I can sing the fifth above. It's most natural for me. I hear it. It's the third is a little too close to the melody for me to snap it up. That fifth is rather distinct, so that's what I go for. It's funny. I did a solo act, and I'd made my own backing tracks. I was doing a Journey song, but it's in D, and I was playing it in A, and a guy come up to me and says, "Damn, you sing high for a big guy," and I'm like, "Dude, I'm in A, and that's pretty easy, you know." But it was contextual, you know. He heard the music and he heard the melody, and he just felt, "Well, man, you're singing high," because the original is pretty high, you know. I mean, I actually used to be able to sing that high when I was in my 20s, but you know, I leave that for the vocalists. Let them do their thing, and I'll try to put in a harmony.